Welcome to episode number 18 of Seeking Focus. Hello, Evan.
Welcome to Seeking Focus, a podcast that provides photographers and videographers with a place to critically compare technology, share ideas, and enhance their skills.
Hey Marty, how are you?
I'm alright. Was that a Grinch? No, what that was the Lord of the Rings, my precious. My precious.
I've got a synthesizer at home, a vocoder, which changes your voice to get that effect, you know, and you don't even need it, you just do it naturally.
Mate, I do. I love my voices, man.
How was your week?
My week was awesome. Managed to buy a new car. And yeah.
Did you get the Ferrari you're looking for, or
Yeah, a little bit cheaper than the Ferrari.
Lamborghini?
Yeah, Lambo, yeah. The only problem is the boot is really limited, so I can't put all my gear in there.
You can't put the tripod in there. And actually, is the
I could probably fit one tripod in there.
I was going to say, isn't the boot the motor?
Nah, it's not. Yeah, so no, the wife bought a new car, so I'm wrapped. Yeah, it's good. It's great. It's actually I enjoy driving it. So yeah. Other than that, it's just a bit of a play around and keep up with the work. It's just non-stop. I got to stop it. But you know what? I'm actually enjoying the Seeking Focus podcast. I actually really enjoy talking and to you because you're my best. Hey, how was your? I'm talking shit now. How was your week, man?
You enjoyed talking. My week was good. I was on. Actually, I was going to say...
Was it a holiday?
It wasn't really a holiday. It was a bit of a holiday crossover photo shoot. I was in Singapore for a week.
Ooh.
Or just over a week, actually.
Was it hot? Was it hot?
Oh, very hot. Singapore's always hot. It's stinking hot. It's ridiculously hot. But it's also very moist and humid. So it takes a couple of days to get used to it in the start. You get there, it feels like a wet blanket smacked you in the face. Yeah, after a couple of days, you're okay. So you try and aim to spend the first day or two sitting at the pool. And doing absolutely nothing, acclimatize, and then go out and start doing your photography.
Yeah. Do you do a lot of landscape stuff there, do you?
I do. I go to Singapore regularly, probably once every 2 years or so, to do landscape photography. And on my website and social media pages, you'll actually be able to see a lot of the photos that I've taken in past. The photos this time were even better.
Nice.
Just got to actually release
I heard Singapore is really nice and clean and really safe and everything else. Is that true?
It is, without a doubt, one of the nicest places I've been to. Developed places, I should say. It's not like, it's not like...
Not like when we went to India?
Not India. I mean, different fields. India was not as developed. Singapore's very, very developed, very clean, very sterile. Everything's in order. Everything's perfect, And as I told you, I also had the family in tow. So while I'm doing photo shoots, they're sitting at the pool. The kids are drinking Bacardis, and the wife's working on a tan.
The mocktails, what do you mean?
No, real cocktails. No, no, they're not that bad. They're learning, but they're not quite there yet. So
did you manage to sneak off at night while the kids and everything else is
sunset's
sleeping?
there to die for,
okay.
And the nighttime photography, the amount of light in the cities is just amazing. The structure's amazing, everything's amazing in Singapore. Worth going there for, just for a holiday. Very family friendly, very safe. You can let your kids run crazy around there and nothing happens. You don't have to be paranoid all the time like other places. So definitely a fantastic place to go, and the photography is sensational. They do light shows. They've some amazing sculptures. They've got great buildings. Fantastic.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's good, man. Sounds like a good holiday.
It was. And I look forward to going there again. I
Fantastic.
think this was actually the 6th time I've actually been there.
Don't you get sick of it?
I don't actually.
Well, okay.
I still can't believe that Singapore is such a small place. It's only like 20-something kilometres from side to side. So you can literally walk from one side of the country to the other in one day.
Nice.
So it's amazing. All right. On with the show. This week we have a special guest in. The special guest goes by the name of Gene. He's actually one of our earliest listeners, and he got in contact with us a very long time ago and wanted to come on the show and actually ask a few questions. And we just haven't been able to find the time where we all could meet up at the same time. So it has been a struggle. We've gone out on a few shoots together. So welcome, Gene. How are you?
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. Now, Gene, just for some clarity, what level of photography are you at the moment?
Beginner.
Beginner.
Yep.
Okay. So you've come onto the show today to ask us questions from a perspective of a beginner.
Yep. Come to
That's it.
to pick your brains.
Pick our brains.
Tell us something about yourself, though. Tell us how long you've been doing photography. What kind of photography do you enjoy? What turns you on with photography, baby? That sounds really weird, I know.
Well, I got my camera in 2020.
What type of camera, first of all?
5D Canon 5D Mark III.
Okay.
I think we've all been there, haven't we?
Yeah,
I've still got one.
Yeah, I just sold mine.
Yeah, you
The
sold yours.
Toyota Hilux of cameras.
It is indestructible and keeps going,
Yeah,
and has a lot
true.
more grunt than a Hilux as well.
Yeah, that's true.
So I got my camera around a week before we went into lockdown for an extended period. So first thing I sort of got into was attempting macro photography at home.
Macro is cool.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
I've never actually really gotten into macro. I've got the lenses. I've just never had the chance to do it. I don't know. There's nothing called me for it.
Is that the lens that you got then? That was from my old lens, wasn't it? Or did you get something different?
So starting out, I used the 24-105.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was just sort of some macro ideas at home, sort of shooting anything that I had around the house and trying to take pictures of the dog and the kids and the weeds growing in the garden and all of that, all of the stuff you take photos of when you can't leave the house.
Yeah, that's that. I think we've all started off there, haven't we?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, I've got some really great grass photos from the front of the house.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah.
And then
So that was sorry. You mentioned macro photography, though. So what macro lens do you have?
it's a Sigma.
Yeah.
105.
Is it 105?
Yeah, it's
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
2.8.
Yep.
Mm.
And that
Sorry, I know.
Look at the psychic ability. You know?
Yeah. That I haven't used. Like I've used it. I did some smoke shots a couple of weeks ago.
I saw those smoke shots. They were sensational. So that's what lens you were using on those shots.
Yeah.
And that's what the skull was. It there was a skull with a cigar.
Yeah,
and
skull, glass skull, smoking a cigar.
Can you give us those shots and then we can chuck it on their notes on Insta or something like that? So that'll be good.
I can send those.
Good.
Yep. But I really haven't figured out what I like most. So I like macro. I like portrait. I like landscapes.
Yep.
I like sports.
Cool.
well, it might actually be easier if you just told us what you don't like.
I don't know what I don't like.
But that's the beauty of photography, though, isn't it? Like you can sort of express yourself, and every single photographer is potentially different eye. You know what I mean? For different things. So it's great. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Oh yeah. So that's I sort of have, I guess, an interest in all of them. Some of that interest might be passing interest, but I like to try them out. I like to test.
It's good to deep into a lot of the other things as well. I mean, when I used to do got into photography, I didn't actually like a lot of pictures or photos of people. And my wife always said to me, "Oh, that's why you're going hiking, because you're going to take photos of nature and this and that." But you know what? The funny thing is, when I started working with actors, I loved taking photos of people and portraits and other things. So it was fantastic. You know what I mean? So I don't know about you, Ev. What's your preference?
Landscape. I'm left alone to my own devices, and I travel around in places that most people haven't seen, and take photos that inspire me, like from scenes. And that's what I do. I mean, I do a variety of different photos. I do a bit of everything. But landscapes has always been my passion, and just capturing something that a lot of people haven't seen. Yeah. That's always been. You
really like your long exposures as well, don't you?
I do. I do some ridiculously long exposures, and in hindsight, I sometimes look back and I think to myself, "Do I really need to do a 10-minute exposure on this shot? I should have done what Marty does and used f8 as opposed to f30."
F11.
Oh, so you moved up to F11 now?
I've always been F11, bro.
Well, there you go. I've always been like F22 and F30, and I think the longest exposure, I even use, filters at night time as well to extend the time.
Each to their own.
Yeah, look, it's a hobby, I guess. But you do get the same effect for a much shorter period. But anyway, we're digressing.
Yeah. Sorry, Gene. So hang on. So you got a macro 105, 24 to 105.
Yep.
And what else?
And a 70-200.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Is that a 2.8 or a f4?
2.8.
Oh.
But I think if it's not the oldest, it's one of the oldest Canon one. Like for
the first
the
one?
compatible with the 5D.
Yeah. I think that was the one. Gen 1.
Gen 1, there was Gen 2. I think was there a Gen 3 on that?
Yeah, I think it is. Oh,
Because there was a couple of Gen 2 and Gen 3 lenses that popped up towards
there's
the end.
16 to 35 Gen 3. I know for sure.
Yeah, because I've got the second. That's my
Yeah.
first and foremost love that lens.
I'm not sure
I've
about
got the
this
Series
one.
2. There was a third one, but it never really. The Series 3 lenses never really did much because then Canon released their mirrorless range and they just stopped producing those lenses, and so everyone's sort of
I
dumping.
wonder
them.
if they. Sorry, I'm just something popping into my head. I wonder those EF lenses, are they still being produced?
I
Don't know. Because they'll be so expensive these days. I mean, everyone will be sort of paying to get a good one. You know what I mean? So
yes and no, because I'm still buying them because I still have a Canon. I've got two Canons. Was it two? Three? No, two, definitely two. But they also the lenses that I use on my video productions as well. So with the EF mounts, and the prices on them have dropped.
all right.
Not substantially, and people are still asking drug money for them.
Yeah.
And for lenses that are pretty much obsolete in today's sort of photography world, but they are still quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
But they haven't gone up.
Interesting. Okay, so we keep on diving off to different locations here.
Yes.
So we got 3 lenses, so the 70-200. And is there anything else?
Is there a 50 in there? Do you have a
I
50?
do have a nifty 50, but
Nifty 50.
it's sitting on my son's camera, so it doesn't really leave there.
Okay.
I've probably used it twice
Nice. Okay.
in 2 years. Yeah.
So that would not be your favourite lens then?
It's great for portraits.
Yeah, I think just the fact that my son got a camera and it goes on there and it's sort of stayed on there. I actually quite like the 70-200 for portraits.
That's one of the most renowned ones for portrait stuff and
Definitely.
sporting as well.
I like sort of having a little bit of distance between me and the subject. Just try and sort of
Sounds like me. I just don't like being around my subjects. If I can be 3 kilometres away from them.
people act a bit more natural when you're not in their face.
Yeah,
I think.
true that.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
All right, so basically you've come on the show today to ask us questions from a perspective of a newbie, so that basically we could sort of answer a few of those questions, because sometimes we get carried away and we start talking about high-end stuff and technical things which most people probably starting off don't understand, and we forget about our roots, where we came from. So you're bringing it back down to the basic sort of questions that are really important to beginners. Now, you wouldn't let us see the questions, which is making us a little bit nervous. Now, normally we make our guests feel nervous, but in this case, you're making us feel nervous. So we're a little bit hesitant. We're not sure what you're going to be asking us, and hopefully, they're not too probing.
Have full confidence in your ability to shed some light on these.
Marty,
on these questions.
I want to be calling on you to answer all the questions today, because I don't know. I need everything scripted. All right, so what we'll do is we'll start off. You can bring in your questions, and you can either address them to both of us or one of us, or you could just throw it out there. Whatever works for you.
Okay, so I'll start off with what I think for you will be quite an easy one.
What is my name? No.
Stop interrupting, man. Let
sorry.
him answer the question.
In saying that, I'm actually genuinely interested in the answer, because if someone asked me this question, I couldn't answer it clearly. So the first question for you two is, can you please explain composition in layman's terms?
You first, Evan.
Shit. Oh, sorry.
Pardon me,
The
what was that?
composition, like honestly, the composition to me is it's something that takes you inside an image, right? So what I try to explain to people is, when I sort of taught people a bit of photography, is basically when you look at an image, it makes you feel like you're inside the image, right? So basically you have a good forward focus, or like a subject at the foreground, and a subject at the background. So potentially your eye looks at that sort of image and it takes you inside through the image. So you just look at it and you can see the foreground and the background, and that's the composition that will just draw you inside. I mean, there's technical, obviously, explanations, but like sometimes it's good to break the law of, say, thirds or whatever else, you know what I mean? So there's a couple of things that you can sort of try and see what works. But to me, composition is, it just takes you inside the actual image. So the foreground, the background, focusing, maybe potentially sometimes at the foreground or the background. It just takes you inside.
It's interesting that you say that, because I took it similarly, but in a different way. So it's funny how the same question can mean different things to different people, and that's what photography is about. It's about your interpretation of things. Composition, break it down, it's composing an image. And why are you composing that image? You're trying to express something, a story. You're trying to, if it's a product for a commercial or whatever, you're trying to get a product out there. You're trying to get the people's attention. If you're doing landscape, you're trying to capture the atmosphere. And one of the things that I think with landscape photography people forget is they rush out, they just start taking happy snaps, and they don't really think about what's in the picture, what are they trying to say. So for composition, for me, it's about, first of all, what am I trying to explain to these people? What's the point of this photo? Is it just, I'm just taking some random photo into the distance and because it looks cool? Or am I trying to capture the atmosphere? Am I trying to capture the lighting, the structures? So for me, it's about telling a story and being able to capture all these different elements within that picture to tell that story as best as possible. There are technical sides to it, the rule of thirds, leading lines, which is another one that we haven't mentioned. So, setting up the picture so that instead of having a person in the middle of the picture, which is more of a documentary style photo of a person, portrait, have them on the side, so it creates a little bit more atmosphere, a little bit of story, blur out the background.
The law of thirds.
Yeah, basically. And the law of thirds, blur the background out, so depth of field. So the person who's looking at the picture is not drawn into the background, they're drawn into what you're trying to show them. So the person that you're taking the photo of. Leading lines, once again, it leads the person's eye into the main part of the picture. So there's all these technical things. And I actually I produce a lot of courses for people and do a lot of training. And this is a story that I mentioned a number of times to people, and sometimes it goes down really well, sometimes it doesn't. During lockdown, and this is depth of field really plays a big part in it, telling a story. There was not a reporter, but a person doing a presentation on television. And basically, they had no depth of field. Basically, it was like you could see everything that was in the background. It was a really busy background. And they had a very important message that they were trying to get through. Problem was they were sitting up against this bookcase, which had all these books and all these items. And in the background, because automatically people's eyes wander away from the main subject if there's things to look at. And there was a sex toy on the back on the bookshelf. I'm not sure if anyone remembers that.
No.
So anyway, the subject was really important, but the whole thing became about the sex toy.
Yeah, of course.
So, the image and what you were trying to portray was the woman telling a story, but it became something else because it wasn't done properly. So composition for me is about really capturing what I'm trying to tell people. So that's what composition means to me. Jane, does that help you at all?
Yeah, that's quite helpful. So I guess, in a sense, I had composition confused with depth of field. So to me, from like what Marty was saying about how you draw a subject or draw a person in through an image, that to me, I had that as in my head as depth of field, as the depth of the image. So yeah, that's actually really helpful.
So also depth of field does play part of it. So you weren't wrong.
I mean, look, most of the time when I'm shooting, say, composition wise, like landscape, I mean, composition can be obviously moved to portraits and landscapes and whatever else, right? But when I'm normally doing landscape composition, I normally try to sort of maybe put like a tree in front, you know what I mean? And then like the image behind you, even that's a St Kilda pier, for instance, you know what I mean? You got leading lines basically going inside, so your eye automatically is drawn to that sunset, and that St Kilda Pier is obviously, just drawing you right in. You know what I mean? So that's pulling you right inside the actual image, and that's what I mean. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And with depth of field, once again, I mean, for landscape photography, me personally, I like to provide an image that's sharp in every, in the foreground, rear, rear, middle, everything. So I do a lot of focus stacking in my images. But that's not to say that you can't do a landscape photography shot which captures
the field is there.
Yeah, so it captures something in the foreground and the background's blurry, but you can still see it's mountains, it's a river, but it's concentrated because you're trying to show something that's happening. Like it might be a flower in bloom or something like that. So you can still use depth of field in that type of shot. So it comes down to what you're trying to express. And also I think it's important for us to mention to people that everyone has their own interpretation of what things are and how things work. So whilst we're telling you this is what we feel, there might be other interpretations out there.
That's right. And that's the thing about photography, you know what I mean? And Gene is obviously a prime example here because, the way what we, you're quite new to photography, and when what we see as, hey, this is awesome, you might say, hey, now I want to do it my way. You know what I mean? And that's a really good thing to do. Yeah,
being different. Because if everyone shot the same shot and shot it in exactly the same way, it would be pretty boring.
Instagram.
Yeah. Perspective is also another part of composition, which I don't think people understand properly. So, one of the big problems with people taking photos, like you send out 5 people to take the same photo and everyone will do exactly the same thing. They'll pull out their camera at eye level and take the same shot. So all those photos will be identical. But then you've got a person who's lying on the ground or elevated and they're taking it from a different angle, which changes the perspective and the composition and everything. So it looks completely different. And, so even where you're taking the photo from will impact that as well.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's a mixture of a lot of things, but they're the general sort of ones that I would be,
Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. That makes sense. So sort of leading on from that, if you were to get someone come to you who's wants to get into photography, they've never touched a camera before, just what would you feel is more important? So obviously someone can't learn everything at once. So would you feel it's more important to learn the composition, sort of like how to frame, I guess, an image, not literally frame, but how to compose an image, or to learn the settings, like learn the technical side of the camera, or I guess more the artistic side of an image?
It's an interesting question. With the training classes that I run for people, I actually do a 2 to 3 hour session, and I basically teach the people manual settings, so aperture, ISO, shutter speed, but I also teach them about composition. And it doesn't have to be completely hugely in depth, but if they're trying to learn about manual features of the camera, you need to teach them those 3, what's it called?
The 3 pillars.
The field pillars, that's it. When I first met Marty, and this is actually, I've mentioned this a couple of times, but I don't think I've ever really explained it. As a photographer, I had the ability to, I used to be able to frame the picture really well. I used to capture really interesting photos. So the content on my pictures were well thought out, and the where I based everything was fantastic. I never really understood what I was doing, but I just had an eye for it. But I never really understood the technical side of photography. So using your aperture, your ISO, I knew what I was doing roughly, but never really took it out to extremes. And when we first started taking photos together, I sort of was watching you and I was like, what the hell is he doing? So people were saying to me my photos were great and the composition of the picture was great, but the actual technical side and the lighting and, how I shot that picture, it really sucked. And I learned a lot from you, Marty, and thank you very much for that. I don't think do I say thank you enough?
Oh, I think you do.
I do, yeah. So I learned how to use all the other features as well with the composition, and it just brought out these pictures and made them amazing. So people always love my photos, but once I started doing it the right way, everyone loved it. So I think it's a mixture of both. So yeah, for me personally, it's both. Marty,
yeah, no, definitely. Look, it is a both thing as well. If you were going to say pick one, I'll probably say composition, chuck the camera on auto and let the camera do the work, you know what I mean? Because these days you can do so much with these new cameras, you know what I mean? Like And the thing is, we're talking about 15, 20 years ago, you had to have film. You know what I mean? So it costs you money. Right now, SD cards are cheap.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So if you set up a camera on the tripod, say at night, you can put the camera on the manual or on auto mode, and that camera will take some cool images. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Regardless. Now, to make it look more impressive, then you throw in the technical component to it of your ISOs, of your apertures, of your shutter speeds, and all that sort of jazz, right? And then on top of that, again, you can use ND filters potentially. You know what I mean? So sometimes, just as an example, you say go out at night and you want to take photos, say, of, I don't know, street lights. Yeah. Now, if you put that aperture on, say, f11 or 16, you're going to get those really bright sparks of, I don't know if you know what I mean, but you get, some really nice starburst. Correct. Yeah. What are you trying to say?
That's actually caused by the leaves inside the lens.
The aperture.
Yeah. So and the thing is,
they sort of come across, right?
Yeah, and depending on how many leaves there are in the actual lens, you get more starburst.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yep. So now, basically, if you want to, that's great, because obviously that's a really good effect. But then some people don't like that effect, for instance. You know what I mean? I personally don't like that effect. So sometimes if I go at night, I might put an ND filter on it and shoot it landscape at wide open 2.8. It's like a 16 to 35 or 2.8, and focus to say infinity. And to be able to get that image, you know what I mean? You can slow it down, the shutter speed or whatever else, but you're not going to get those starburst effects. You know what I mean? So you're going to get a normal effect, and it's a great thing to try it as well. So yeah, look, it like I've said, it's a mixture of things, but it's up to individual to sort of But yeah, if you want to, just composition is the primary thing for me, I'd say.
Yep. Cool. So we'll move on a little bit. So I'm literally seeking focus. So I've got a couple of questions about
That's a good one. I like that.
we should use that name for the podcast.
Focus.
No, I have problems. So
don't worry, we all have problems. I'm probably more substantial than most. But
so a percentage of my images are good, but a lot of them are out of focus. So I've got a couple of questions in regards to that. So I'll start with so point of focus in an image. How do you manipulate the point of focus, say in the viewfinder, to build an image? Any pointers, anything you can offer on that? Because so up until recently, I was kind of under the impression that you always wanted the point of focus in the dead center. So yeah, if you guys can help me out.
Well, it's easy for portraits. Generally speaking, with portraits, you focus on the eye.
Correct.
So you take a photo, focus on the person's eye. If the eye is sharp, the rest of the image follows. In saying that, if you're running a lens with an f-stop of 0.9 and
even 1.4, man.
Yeah, you focus on the eye, and by the time you get to the nose, it's blurry. So you sort of got to keep the f-stop in perspective, I think, as well. But with portraits, generally speaking, you will go for the eye. I mean, if it's like, there's sometimes where you can't, like there's a big group photo or whatever, you're not going to be able to focus on an individual eye, because as the people go out to the outskirts of the photo, they won't be in focus. Yeah. So it's one of those things where you sort of got to try and balance it up. In big group photos where the focus can change so quite substantially, because the person in the middle is only like 2 meters away from you and the person on the far end is like 5 meters away, you'd probably want to keep a high f-stop. So probably be shooting at f7, sort of like that, or above, to try and keep everyone in focus. And then in those types of instances, I probably wouldn't be using the eye. I'd probably be using the chest of the person in the middle, or someone in the... Actually, I wouldn't be using the person in the middle, because that would cause a difference. I would be using a person who's halfway between the end person and the middle person, and that way it'll balance out the middle person and the last person, so the focus would be a little bit more in balance. That's what I would do for a portrait or group photos thing. Doesn't always work, because there's sometimes where you're just in such a rush and you're just randomly taking photos, and you take 50 photos and one of them will be focused. But generally speaking, if you've got the time to do that, that's what I do. Do you do anything different with people?
No, it's very similar as well, man. Because like depends how well the camera can handle the ISO noise. You chuck it onto f8 or f11, and then try to get everything in focus. Most of my landscape stuff is done on f11. You know what I mean? Saying that, though, I have used f16 and even higher as well. You know what I mean? But then you kind of look, each individual person is different, and that's why we're getting some great photographers. And it's not just the photography component; it's the post-production too. You know what I mean? Like Evan mentioned before as well, focus stacking. To get everything nice and sharp in focus, Photoshop does everything else. You just have to make sure that you focus stack it properly. You know what I mean?
And sorry, for the people who don't know what focus stacking is, do you want to?
Yeah, so focus stacking is when you're taking, taking landscape and you have a foreground and background potentially image or focus that you want to sort of make sure that you focus on the first photo will be, say, on the foreground, and then you will potentially focus on the middle and then focus on the end or the background.
So we're saying we take the same photo, multiple versions
with
of
different focus.
Yeah, so basically the photo is identical, except you're focusing in different parts of the photo.
Yeah.
And then in Photoshop or Lightroom, you can pose those together and the whole picture becomes sharper.
Which is pretty straightforward as well, because there's an option there in Lightroom, and I never really used Lightroom, but Photoshop, you just basically say focus stack this image, select the 3 images or 4 images or whatever you want to do, and they'll basically align those images and stack them at the same time with the focus pinly sharp. Yeah.
So when you say that, are you literally, so the little square in the viewfinder, are you moving that for each image, or are you just setting a different f-stop?
Well, I would do, so I'll basically focus on something that I really want to be able to focus, and then middle, and then the background.
Okay, yeah.
That's what I would
do. So you are
do.
moving that dot around.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of different things that you need to be mindful of, like if you're doing sports photography, for example. And this was something that I was trying to teach someone the other day, and it takes a lot of practice, so it's very difficult. What you do is, especially if you're shooting in manual, and this, pardon me, you're taking a photo of someone flying past. For example, mountain bike riding. And what will happen is you'll pan with the person who's actually flying along. Hit the microphone there. Yep. So you pan across with the person who's moving, and then what ends up happening is you take the photo at a particular point. Now, when you first start panning and you press the button down to try and get the rough focus, where that focus is compared to the middle shot where you're going to take the photo, the focus is going to be out. So what I do in those types of instances, and also the lighting will be different because depending on where you're starting from, where you're taking.
On the fast image then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what I try and do is I figure out where I want the photo taken. So say, for example, I'm shooting against a tree. So I'll set up the camera to take a photo there. So I'll basically get the focus on that tree area or just before the tree area where the bike will be going flying past. And then I would take the focus off auto and put it onto manual and not touch the focus, because I know at that point there what I'm going to be taking a photo of is in focus. And I adjust the aperture and the lighting and stuff, so I know that when I take that photo it's properly exposed. And then I'll move the camera back to the start and I'll start tracking the person who's coming along, so I get that matching speed of the person coming across. And just as they cross the point where I've actually created the focus point and the brightness and everything else, I'll take the photo there.
Wow.
And so what that does is it basically creates this perfectly sharp image of where I've taken the photo. It's got the blur in the background, but that's another way of doing it. But you need to be panning perfectly. You need to take the photo while you're still panning. You need to, the timing of where you're taking the photo. It is more complex, and it is difficult. A lot of people can't do it. And if you are trying this at home, do it multiple times. Don't give up. That's one way. Have you ever tried that? Or?
No, I haven't. I'm just a hack, mate. So I just like.
It's just because I found that when I was trying to get these moving shots, when I started aiming, the focus would be completely out of whack to where I was going to be taking the photo. So, like if you're someone's going past you and you're taking a whole bunch of shots, generally your camera will be sitting on the one focus point, and it'll take multiple shots with that one focus point.
There's one thing that you forget though. I shoot with a Sony, and you two don't. Suck it up, princess.
Does your camera change the focus point as you're taking photos?
Yeah, of course it does.
Well, you're using face tracking or okay, so that's different.
It's,
You can
super fast.
Yeah, but you can actually set that up on our cameras as well. But if you're not using that method, so anyway, that's
You're getting a little bit out.
While we're on sports, I do have a question about shutter speeds.
sorry. Gene, did I actually answer your question, or did I just go on some random spree there?
You did go.
It
on
was
a
so
random
long
shit.
I can't remember what the question was.
I usually go on these random sprees, and sorry, apologies to everyone out there listening. Yeah, laugh it up, Fuzzball. Sorry, Jay, back to you.
All right, sports. Go on.
So I tried my hand at some sports photography the other week, probably 2 weeks ago now, and I got some good images, but probably out of about 300, I probably got 20 that I actually liked. And some of that was
That's still pretty good figures, but you know.
some of that was due to like the distance. Like I could only stay on one spot, and the game was moving up and down the field. So some of them were just too far away to be.
Are we talking about a footy game or are we talking about
rugby?
something? Rugby. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But some of the ones that I got were just too blurry, and so I had my it was around sunset, so the light was and it was cloudy, a little bit cloudy, so the light was constantly changing. But I was looking at my shutter speeds because I haven't really done sports before, and I think the max I did was about, I think it was 1/250th of a second, if that's right. And it just, to me, that seemed, I was looking at that number and it seemed really fast.
Yeah.
And I think I went to 1/400th of a second at one point. But yeah, when I went and looked at all my photos later, I was
blurry.
like, wow, it must have been way too slow. Yeah, most of them were blurry.
So keep in mind when the subject is moving really fast, 250 is not fast enough.
Yeah.
You know, you got to go at least 1,000 to 1,500, if not more.
Okay,
You know?
yeah.
And with the Mark III, I'm pretty sure you can do up to 8,000ths of a second as well.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I mean that's super quick, yeah.
Yeah.
And for a really fast subject, like a footy player or rugby player or whatever else, when they're running really quickly, you need to be able to freeze him in time. You know what I mean? So yeah, 250 might be even like it. Normally, when a person is walking and I want to get them blurred out, probably about 1/4 of a second is just enough, you know what I mean? If not even longer. But when you want to freeze them, when they're just walking, then 250 to 400 or 500 is probably the way to go.
Okay.
If they're running, it's even higher. That's what I mean.
Okay, yeah. See, it was just like, and I guess that's having no kind of experience in it. Like I was looking at 1/250th, and I thought, you know, a 2/50th of a second is
fast, but it's not fast enough.
It's not. No, it's definitely not fast. But quick question. I mean, if you're going to go as fast as you're saying, Marty, you need to have a quick lens, and you also need to have the ISO, cranked all the way up. The Mark III, great camera, but it is old by technology standards. Were you using what lens were you using at the time?
70-200.
Okay, so that's a 2.8, and that doesn't change.
Yeah, I'm not talking about using 8,000ths of a second, right? But I'm still talking about over 1,000. That'd probably be the way to go if you want to freeze that time. Yeah. If you want to have a bit of a motion blur, and then what you can try also next time is you try to pan while you're taking that photo,
which is what I was saying before.
Yeah, so you potentially can have that bit of a subject nicely and sharp,
but the background's blurred.
But the background is a little bit blurred. When 250 of a second, you won't get a hell of a lot of blur. But yes, you
definitely, and especially if you're just taking standard photos where the person's moving but you're not, that's going to cause issues. So look, with your camera, I to be honest with you, I've never really cranked up the ISO too high on it. But do you remember offhand where you started getting a lot of noise with the ISO on a Mark III?
That's a great question. I think when I was doing star lapses, no more than 2,500. 2,000 was probably 2,000, 2,500. If I was going over the 3,000 ISO, that's when I was starting getting a lot of
sandpaper. Yeah, I generally tell people just to sort of stay below 1,000. But I mean, in some instances,
that's reasonable. Yeah. But like I think when I was doing star lapses, because I was doing time lapses of stars, and I was leaving the camera there all night, you know what I mean? So I used to set up a swag or tent next to it and then just left it there. And look, the images were just right because with the stars you have to have that sort of medium focus, and then the focus will what am I trying to say? So depending on what lens you have, that's how fast the shutter speed is going to be. Therefore, your ISO will be according to that as well. So, yes, 2000 I think is probably wouldn't be pushing it more than that.
Yeah, and the reality behind it is having a grainy picture is probably not as bad as having a blurry picture.
Correct.
Yeah, so I
well,
would
you can fix the grain in post.
Yeah, I mean to a degree, obviously, but so I'd be pushing up the ISO a little bit, opening up the f-stop, and just trying to pan with the actual movement. So don't just take a standard photo, and try and increase those speeds.
That's it. Rock and roll.
Yeah, cool.
And you know, if you've got a massive flash in the background as well, that'll probably help as well. You know, one that blinds everyone.
Yeah.
That's just stadium lighting.
Blinding people,
I guess that kind of segues nicely into ISO because so I recently went on a 3-week holiday to New Zealand, where I'm from, and I was doing some bird photography because where I grew up, it's right next to they ring fenced an entire mountaintop, and it's a bird sanctuary. So there's all these native birds, and they fly sort of out to all the local areas and feed off trees and stuff like that, fruit trees and things like that.
Nice.
But before I left, I was reading an article on wildlife photography, and the advice in the article was to set the ISO to auto.
Yeah. So normally with the camera that you've got, and potentially any other camera, is you can actually set camera ISO to auto, but still have the minimum and maximum. You know?
Yeah.
So basically, you can still set the camera, say minimum, say 50, but maximum will be, say 2000. You know what I mean? Or 2000. So you potentially, so my Sony can handle 12,800, for instance. You know what I mean? So I can have that as maximum ISO.
Yep.
But you know, like, you can adjust things around. You know what I mean? So if you find that your images are being too grainy at 3,000 or 4,000 ISO, then therefore, obviously, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, bird photography, obviously, depending on what light you've got and everything else, it's probably great to shoot it at 2.8 anyway.
Yep.
To be able to get that bokeh / you know, depth of the actual image, and then obviously have that bird nicely sharp in focus and everything else blurred out.
Yeah, because I thought I got a couple of amazing shots, and they come out really grainy, and it was the ISO was at about 3600. And I never really shoot anything with ISO above 100.
So go into menu settings on the camera, and then basically you can go into, I think it's a red menu on the Canon, and then just basically go down to the ISO, and you can go into auto ISO and then set up maximum and minimum.
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, okay, that's one thing. So one other thing that, you know, like with everything, when it comes to advice of other people, you got to remember that they're talking from their own perspective. So it comes down to what they know. They might not know any better. It also depends on their equipment that they're using. So their equipment might be newer, older, whatever. So there's going to be differences there. Everyone has an opinion. I think you need to take everything that people say with a grain of salt, as they say. Yeah. So you listen to what people say and think about it. Don't just take it verbatim. Don't just sort of go, oh, they've told me to do auto ISO, I'm going to do that, and then get home and wonder why your photos, pardon my expression, but why your photos didn't work out. I was going to say something else, but
say please.
I'm not. No. But you know, but you don't want to get home. You don't want to spend like a whole week shooting something, and then you get home and every photo's just shit. Yeah. And you just look at them and go, oh my God, I just wasted an entire week. I could have been at the pub getting drunk the whole
3
time.
weeks as it was.
That's right.
You couldn't have been at the pub getting drunk. But you know, at the end of the day, you know, take everything that you hear from people with a grain of salt. Especially
that's the whole thing. Yeah, no, that's the whole thing about photography. Everyone's got their own sort of style. Everyone's got their own thing, and that's why there's plenty of other photographers that, you know, this photographer, you know, might look spectacular in one way, but then the other photographer looks, you know, different as well. You know what I mean? So yeah, look, you know, definitely.
Yeah. So grain of salt with everything that you hear, especially the stuff that we talk about.
Yeah, that's right. We don't know. Yeah. We don't know nothing from nothing.
Yeah.
We know.
We use Sony, so that really sucks. Oh no, sorry, I don't use a Sony.
Hopefully that answers your question, though.
Yeah, that helps. That helps a lot. So depth of field in portraits. tell me all about it. How to create it, how to utilize it.
Yeah. Do you want to go first, Ed?
Well, probably establishing why you want to use depth of field in a portrait is important. I think that determining that to begin with. You can use a blurry background, in a portrait to make the foreground or the subject matter stand out. Like we were talking earlier on about the person with the bookshelf and the sex toys on the shelf. You'd blur out the background so the main person is the main thing that everyone's looking at. But it depends on what type of photography you're doing. So, I mean, like, for example, if you're doing a documentary style, or you're doing a passport photo, you want the sharpness all the way through. If you're doing like a nice sort of shot for like a dating profile, you want people to see this person and, be in the outdoors and it's all beautiful, but they need to be the main subject, so you want to blur the background out a little bit so the people are drawn to the main character, but they can see that this person's an outdoorsy sort of type, You want the attention to be on that person, because if a picture's blurry, you're not going to really look at it.
Yeah,
you will look at that part that is actually sharp. So it depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to do like a passport photo, you're not going to go for that soft image in the background. If you're going for, like a profile photo for maybe a dating site or something like that, I do a lot of those. You want to make the person look soft and beautiful and and have the person's eye drawn to their better qualities, as opposed to where they're standing, and the person lying in the gutter behind them or whatever. So depth of field, you need to figure out what you're trying to achieve before you go for it.
No, I totally agree, man. It's you got to determine, like any other shoot that you do, you got to determine what you're trying to achieve. You know what I mean? If you're trying to achieve the person, they're in the beautiful mountains, you want to put that person in front, yet you still want everything behind him, her, focused. So therefore, you're not going to use 2.8 or 1.4. You know what I mean? You're going to use...
Yeah, because you're trying to show
FA,
the environment.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's actually a photo just directly behind you, Marty, which you took in India, if I remember correctly, from the hotel balcony.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. It's a girl picking weeds from a...
wheat? Is it wheat?
Wheat. No, so she's getting weeds from the wheat field.
Okay, I'm just seeing green, so my glasses aren't on. So, but she's holding this big stack of green stuff, weeds or wheat or whatever it is, and she's in a massive field. It's like the whole thing's green, and there's this little person in the middle of all the bushes, with more bushes on top of them, and that's perfectly in focus. Everything's in focus. There's
she is, but not the foreground or the background. Really,
because from here it actually looks like. Well, you can still see some detail. It's not completely blurred out where it's like just a mulch. So for me, from here, it actually looks like there's a little bit of detail in there. So I'm presuming you probably would have been shooting at about f3, I'm guessing. 2.0. Well, yeah, I was close. It's 0.2 out. But you can still see the detail, and it's in a field. I mean, you could have gone down to like a f1 or something, and then the field would have just been green. Just this green
everything
mulch.
would be blurred out. Yeah.
So but that's a great photo, and it sort of captures the moment. She's in the middle of this field. It's just a huge, vast field, and it's a great photo. Sometimes you don't want to completely blur out the backgrounds. I mean, people automatically think I've got to create this big blur in the background, and they just completely blur everything out, and it sort of defeats the purpose of the atmosphere that you're trying to build. So it comes down to individual photos. Yeah,
it does, but the thing is as well. A lot of people want that too, yeah? Like, it makes the image schmick, yeah? Like we're talking about, And the thing is, you can't just achieve that with the LG lens, for instance. You do have to spend a bit of a dollars on the lens. And that's why, the 70-200 2.8 is great for that sort of stuff, you know what I mean?
Yep.
I've got 16-35 2.8 as well, you know what I mean? It's quite an expensive lens as well. And but yes, you can achieve that, yet you can still stop it down to obviously f11 or even higher, you know what I mean? So yeah, look, it's all up to the lens, I mean, personally I've got say 24 1.4 as well, prime. And if I'm gonna take video or photography of a person, it's really soft foreground and background, and that person will be perfectly in sharp, you know what I mean? So yeah, look, knowing everything about it, what the question was, it's kind of hard because it really depends on the subject matter, what you're trying to achieve, and the glass that you have.
Yeah.
Yep.
I wouldn't mind adding on, whilst we're all trying to achieve that blurry background so the person stands out, it also comes down, if you're doing client shots, sometimes you got to listen to the client and they'll tell you that they want something which doesn't make sense to you, but that's what they're asking for. And you try and educate them and say, you try and put the blur in there so you stand out more. And they'll say, no, I just want sharp photos. And it happens every so often to me where I'm about to take a photo and they're like, no, I want everything sharp. And you're like, but it looks better. No, I want everything. And you're like, okay, that's not a problem. That's what you want. I will do that for you because you're the client. So once again, it comes down to the types of shots you're doing.
Okay.
Yeah, makes sense.
Cool. And again, that actually segues quite nicely into what is almost my last question. Equipment, lenses, things like that. So I'm looking for any advice or tips you guys might have on getting like good quality secondhand, like for people who can't just go out and purchase the top of the range, you know.
$3,000 lenses.
So any advice on like where to look, how to deal with people, like, you know.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Do you want me to start, Ivan?
Yeah.
You're just going to have a think about it.
I've got 1,001 things I can add to it, but no, please go first.
With lenses, it's a tricky one, man, because there's so many different factors. I mean, you can have mold in them, you can have scratches in them, have you heard of this new trend that people are just scratching the shit out of the lenses?
Oh yeah, that stupid Instagram. Was it
ridiculous.
No, it wasn't Instagram. It was.
It was something like that.
It was one of those stupid. Yeah, so you get yourself a really expensive lens, and then you go rock and grind the crap out of it, so that you can get this amazing look,
soft look, and whatever else,
which is really a load of crap. So there was actually people destroying lenses because they're idiots. This is the problem with social media, and I hate social media for that reason. But yeah, they were destroying perfectly great lenses trying to get this amazing look. And if you want that, just go buy yourself a second-hand old 1974, 1970s
That's a vintage
lens.
Man. You can't do that to a vintage lens.
Well, no, you don't need to. The vintage lens will take the photo like that for you from the word go. You don't even need to scratch it. You can save your money and don't have to buy any rocks to scratch it. But social media.
Yeah, look, but lenses wise, it's a tricky one because best way, like when I'm sort of I don't buy secondhand lenses anymore. I do buy all my brand new stuff. But look, I would normally have a look at the lens and grab my phone and my torch and just shine it through it and make sure that there's no mold or any sort of anything inside. I mean, the lenses are fully sealed, so there shouldn't be anything inside anyway. However, the cheaper lenses can get obviously bugs and other things crawling in there, you know what I mean? So there's
which has always made me wonder how the hell bugs get into a lens. It's like, what it must be eggs.
I've seen it before, man.
Yeah, I've seen it as well. Yeah, there's like the dead insects in there.
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, look, best, what the lens selection that you have, they're fantastic. I mean, they're quite wide range. I mean, from 50s to 10s and whatever else. So from that perspective, is great. I would potentially grab your camera that you trust, right, and then go to a marketplace person or whatever else where you purchase this lens from. Make sure you bring a laptop.
Yep.
Right, and then take an image of a person or whatever else, and then put it up on the screen, because the back of the camera is not going to give you true.
Yeah.
Like the whole,
the back of a camera is so small that it'll hide defects. You won't see the defects until you put it on a big screen.
Yeah. And then obviously later on, potentially try to focus the lens to autofocus, make sure the autofocus is working properly. I mean, in the past there was clunking, and I think the lens that you got off me,
I did. I was actually going to bring that up. I want my money back.
24 to 105, one of the very first lenses that I've got for 10 plus years ago, whatever else. You bought it off me, but then after a while, that lens started.
Yeah, it was within a couple of weeks. I mean, when I bought it, I know you're meticulous with your lenses, so I didn't have a problem. But it failed within about a week of having it.
Yeah, it's really strange and then the focus wasn't catching properly, right?
Yeah, so there was a lot of problems with it. But I'm still using it, believe it or not, to this day, because it's actually one of my favorite travel lenses. There you go. So it does a bit of everything. When I try and focus or use the the zoom part, you can hear it grinding on the inside. you know, it's just got this horrible noise to it, but it still takes photos. And the weird thing is it also has image stabilization on it, which you can switch off. I always switch it off, but for some bizarre reason lately it's kicking in and out. The actual, so you're sitting there, you're about to take a photo and it starts flickering. It's like, and you're like, why is the picture? And you think, I've left the image stabilization on, and it's not on. So so look, the problem with secondhand stuff is you don't have a warranty. You know, and you can't expect to take something back to someone that you bought it off, you know, a week later and say it doesn't work properly, because it's unfair to the other person, especially if they sold it to you working and it was in good faith. So buying secondhand is risky. I've bought a secondhand Sin lens, which I paid an arm and a leg for, and I was on a shoot, and the whole mechanism on the inside for the actual the aperture just broke off. And I'm in the middle of a shoot, and ironically, that was the one time that I had actually just taken another bag, thrown everything in, and I didn't have a backup lens. And I was stuck. I actually had to dismantle the lens on the side of the shoot while things are happening, and I had to rebuild it. I don't know anything about lenses. It was a miracle that I got it working. But that's the type of thing that happens with secondhand things, and you got to accept that it's going to occasionally happen, and you might get caught out. It is.
And I think you just, when you sort of approaching that person to say, hey, I want to buy your lens, do you mind if I bring my camera? Do you mind if I bring my laptop and just test it? You know what I mean?
And if they're legitimate, they wouldn't have a problem with that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And then look, I bought a while back, I bought my Canon 70-200 as well, 2.8 IS, and yeah, look, I spent like $2,000 on it, brand new, second hand. Were brand new, they were like 3.5 back then, and it was fine. You know, it works beautiful, and it was really good lens. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's a bit of a luck, I guess, in a way as well, but then you got to make sure that you do check whatever you can, you know, initially.
So that's the actual buying secondhand, but what you've also got to do is you've got to do a little bit of research about the lenses you need. So you need to determine from the word go what you're going to be taking photos of, and you need to find lenses that are appropriate for that activity. So there's no point in getting a 400 times zoom for landscape photography, because that's just not going to work. So you'd want to get a wide angle lens.
Potentially would, but it depends on what you're trying to achieve.
If you're trying to take a blade of grass from 2 kilometers away or something, but and then get the extender on there as well. But like if you're gonna do landscape, there's no point in getting a zoom lens. So you need to know what you're going to do, what your passion is. You know, if you want a good all-rounder lens, then get something that's got wide and zoom, like that 24-105. That's my travel lens, because it does everything. Even you know, it even flickers and stuff. The added bonus. So it's important to actually, you know, figure out what you're going to use the lens for before you go off and buy them. And I mean, I don't know about you, Marty, but when I first started, I was just buying every lens I could find. Like, oh, I need this lens, and I need that lens, and there's lenses I've got sitting at home which I never used. You know, the pancake lenses. Do you remember the pancake lenses? I've got the full set of those. Wow. I don't think I've ever actually used a single one of them other than to see if it actually fits on the camera. The great lenses.
But you got gas as well, though.
I do.
The gear acquisition syndrome.
Yeah, I do. Definitely.
I do sell my stuff as well. So
I just buy your stuff.
I should probably say, I mean, look, I do a variety of different work at the moment, and client and personal and whatever else. And so I've got few lenses, just to sort of, if you want to know. So I've got a very wide angle lens. So I've got 14mm, but it's a zero distortion. So it's a Laowa 14mm lens. So it's all manual, but it's zero distortion. You know what I mean? And the next lens up, I will have 16-35 G Master, which is equivalent to the L series Canon, potentially. And that's a really expensive lens, but it's really good for landscaping and, you know, stargazing and whatever else. The next one that I've got is 24-70 2.8. So that's really good, just all general perspective. You know what I mean? Lenses for travel and portraits, landscapes, you know, just to sort of get out there. You know what I mean? I've got my nifty 50s. I've got 24-105. Sorry, so 24 1.4 prime. So I've got generally combination of prime lenses and zoom lenses. You know what I mean? Yep. Then I've got 70-200 2.8 IS as well, and that's really good for you know, any sort of portraits or whatever else as well. Like zoom lens is really good to get that sort of bokeh. I think I mentioned in the past. I saw an owl in my backyard a couple of years ago, and I took that lens out, and I got really nice bokeh from the beginning right to the back of the image. You know what I mean? So it's fantastic. And it's always a good idea to get an extender as well. You know what I mean? So if you don't want to spend that extra money on the 400s or 600 lenses, mil lenses, then the 2x extender is really good option too.
Yeah. The same vein, don't forget it does change your f-stop. So if you've got a
of course, well, you lose a bit of light, yeah.
Yeah, so if you've got a 2.8 lens and you put an extender on it, I think it drops it up to a 4.6 or something like that. So you will lose a lot. So be mindful of that.
Does it actually drop?
It does. It does drop quite a bit. It brings up to my 2.8 with the extender on it goes up to a 4.6 or something like that. So that's the 70 to 200. So you do lose a number of stops there. So you need to be mindful of that. But if you do need that zoom abilities and you don't need a fast lens, then it works.
Look, I don't think you need as many lenses as Evan's got, to be honest with you, because he's got suitcases and suitcases of lenses. But, what you've got at the moment, I think it's a really good combination of creativity that you can still create some amazing stuff, and obviously usability in as well, you know what I mean? Because you can use it for client work if you need to, you know what I mean? And have you done any client work in the past?
I did a couple of kind of free jobs.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah, it went okay, but the lighting wasn't very good. I did some for a cafe, and the lighting wasn't good, so... The images were okay, but they just weren't. They didn't look great.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think don't get deterred by that. You know what I mean? Because you got to practice to be able to get to where you need to be. You know what I mean? So yeah. But that's my 5 cents in, yeah.
On the subject of buying lenses, inappropriate lenses, I just remembered one that I actually purchased, and I tried to convince everyone else around me that they should have one too. Do you remember that fisheye lens I bought?
I was just thinking of that.
Yeah, the L series fisheye lens that I think it was 6mm, which completely distorted the image. It turned
was 8mm, but okay.
It was a 6mm. Actually, it's a lockout, but anyway, 6 to whatever it was. And I paid a small fortune for it, and I bought it with the intention of using it for landscape photography, and all it did was create circular balls of everything.
Vignetting big time.
Yeah. Oh, no, vignetting wasn't bad.
Oh, okay.
Though every time I took a photo, my elbows were in the photo because it was so wide. And I went through a stage where I think I used it non-stop for about 3 weeks, and it was never used again. And it's been sitting in my collection, and it just sits there. Another thing to also be mindful of with lenses, when you're buying lenses, is each type of lens has different characteristics. Cheap lenses potentially have discoloration. There's a number of Samyungs out there. And don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking cheap lenses. They have a particular style, but you need to be aware of what they do before you use them. Samyang, for example, has a tendency to create a green tinge to everything. So you need to be prepared. So, you don't go off and buy it and then go, why are my photos shit? Why are they all green? If you know that they're going to be green and you're prepared for it, then you can work with it. It's not a problem. But do your research about lenses, the characteristics. Like I've got lenses that will go up to f30, but I can't remember the name of it. Was it refraction or something? When you get past a certain point on an f range, the image doesn't get sharper, it starts getting blurrier, and that tends to be on the cheaper lenses, the high-end L series lenses and the G Master, G Stars. I was going to say is it G Master?
Yeah, G Master.
Yeah, the G Masters would obviously allow you to get higher on the f range before the distortion happens, but on kit lenses, you'd probably hit like f14 and things will start getting blurry at that point, as opposed to getting sharper. So
with the kit lenses, are alright to start off with.
Yeah,
but then you realise that you can achieve a lot more with a proper.
But it also depends on what you're intending on doing. If you're just doing personal photography and that's your style, it's not
get a phone, get an iPhone.
No, no, I'm not going to go there. That's horrible to say about iPhone. But you can do some amazing stuff with kit lenses.
You can. Yeah.
If you're going to go for, you're going to go commercial and you're going to try and work as a business person. Yeah, okay, kit lenses aren't going to cut it, but for your average Joe Blow, a kit lens is more than sufficient.
Yeah.
You know, it's only when you, pardon my expression, when you get to that point in your life where you think that you're fantastic. In my case, I was a wanker, and I was like, I got to have all series because that's going to make me better. It didn't make me any better; it just made me poorer. You know, yeah. So it's only if you really need them, do your research and know what you're buying. You know, take the time to test those lenses out as well.
I was going to also say is like a lot of people sort of look at me, and when I go out onto a client site and, you know, I have to bring, you know, half of the lenses and whatever else, they go, oh my God, you got all the gear and everything else. And you know what? It took me over 10 years to get that. Do you know what I mean? So unless you got shitloads of cash laying around doing nothing, yeah, you go for it. But like you slowly build up to that sort of, and you know what to do with it. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's like I've got a lot of lenses, but like they're all being acquired over a certain amount of time, like years. You know what I mean?
And this is the problem as well. If you're planning on, you know, upgrading your camera at a later date, and you need to replace every single one of those lenses, that's a lot of money. Now, this is another thing that you need to consider, Jane, because I mean, you've got. I'm not trying to be rude here. It's a great camera, but it is an old camera. The technology is old, right? So, do you invest all this money in these new lenses for a camera that is pretty much defunct, you know, and you're basically you're putting yourself into a corner where, you know, you won't be able to progress from that point? Or do you just get the bare minimum, do the best that you can with them, learn from that, and then when time comes, when you become the pro photographer that you will be, which I strongly believe, you know, it's like the encouragement there. At that point, when you think to yourself, okay, I am now at this point where I'm ready for a new camera, and then you go off and invest in this new mirrorless system with the big, ginormous, you know, huge Canon lenses or Sony lenses or G Master or G String, whatever they're called. Sorry, mate. I'm always taking digs there. But, you know, personally, you've got to decide, are you going to ever progress to that point? Is it something that you've got a passion for? Will you change your platform? Will you, you know, buy a different brand? And if that's the case, then maybe limit yourself to what you've got at the moment, work with what you've got, make the best of it, and then when time comes and you sort of go, I've really reached the limitations of my gear, upgrade. And that way you haven't wasted all this money buying lenses, which, let's be honest, I mean, the F-series lenses, they're still being used, but as days go on, they're getting less and less popular. People are moving across the mirrorless. They will be defunct sooner or later.
Okay.
And sorry, I'm not taking a dig. So I've got the Mark III myself, you know, and I've got so many EF lenses at home. But it just gets to that point where you just sort of got to say, well, where do I cut my losses?
Yeah. So last question, and it relates to professional photography and iPhones.
This is Marty's domain. He does everything on an iPhone.
Just with everyone with a smartphone and a camera in their pocket these days. So, you know, technically everyone is a photographer now. If, you know, they're carrying a camera. So how do you guys see the role of the professional photographer as the years go on, and as these cameras get better in the phones? How do you see the role of the actual professional photographer?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a tricky one, man, because I mean, they're all talking about the new iPhone 14 coming out, for instance, right? And this iPhone 14 has got, you know, 4 or 5K video, and, you know, with ProRes RAW, you know what I mean? And, I mean, it's hard to be able to, it's hard to say, you know what I mean? It's not going to happen, but I don't know, man. It's a tricky one, because I can tell you, you rock up to a client's site and you rip out an iPhone, they're going to laugh at you, you know what I mean? Because they were like, what the hell am I paying you for? I could have just done it myself with a phone, you know what I mean? Which is true. And I mean, there are some amazing images you can just take with an iPhone these days, you know what I mean? But yeah, look, it's to be able to get that full field of color / you know, flexibility and everything else, I still feel like you need a proper camera to be able to do whatever you do, you know what I mean? And it might happen. I can't say no, but it's just, yeah, not in the near future. I don't think. I don't hope. No, I don't know. Evan, you shoot it with Samsung, so I'm not too sure if you can answer that question.
Well, look, Samsung has had 8K video for
of course.
years now. So you're behind the time with the iPhone.
Enough. Yeah, true.
You know, no, but look, having a camera in your phone is really handy. Look, I'll be honest with you. I do a lot of family snaps. Will it ever replace the place of a professional photographer? No. I can put you in a 400 kilometre an hour Bugatti and let you drive it, and you probably go straight into a wall because you can't control it. You don't know what to do. You're not experienced with it. So, yes, you can take photos with your phone, and a lot of technology has gone into these phones, and they do give you decent photos. I'm not going to deny that. Stability control, amazing. There's some amazing stuff that you can do with phones, but when it comes down to photography, you still need to understand the basis of photography, composition. Light. We're going back right to the start of the show. Composition, lighting, all the stuff that you pick up over time. Yeah, your phone will make it easier for you, but will it replace the photographer? Well, not without some practice, no.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, man. Okay. It's, yeah.
Are you going to invest in a whole bunch of lenses for your iPhone?
Oh, I'm Samsung, so...
Oh, good. Yeah, I like you. I knew I liked you. Canon and Samsung. Yeah, my top
That's good. What are we talking time-wise, man? Are we...
Oh, well, we could be here all night.
Yeah, we can be.
that was my last question. So,
thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
That's good.
Thanks for having me on.
It was actually a pleasure. It's good to basically... we met you through the show because you wrote into us. But if anyone else out there has any questions or if they want to appear on the show, we always try and bring in some different guests every so often and try and have a different perspective. Feel free to give us a call or send us an email.
Yeah.
Email me, evan@pixellife.com.au. Marty, your...
Melbourne Images, mate. Marty at melbourneimages.com.au.
Yeah, so you can...
But, look, just shoot us the direct message, and I'm more than happy to have a chat with anyone, whoever. Yeah, it's good.
It's always nice to bring in guests. Jane, thank you very much for coming in. It's been a long time coming. We finally got there in the end. So thank you very much, and thank you for putting those questions together. They caught us a little bit off guard at times. I think I swore a couple of times in there, but they were good.
That was good. That was good fun.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and continue shooting, man. Don't give up. And
Thanks.
Just use whatever you've got and try to maximize it, rather than spending more money on new gear that you don't know how to use.
Yep.
I don't know how to use half of my gear as well, but I still got my gas.
That's because you don't have enough lenses.
That's true.
If you had more lenses, you wouldn't have a problem.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we look forward to doing another podcast very, very soon. So from me, thank you very much, Gene. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for having me on.
All right. Cheers, man.
Take care.
Talk soon.
Stay safe, peeps.